For the record, this is the application 2022-049. The applicant would be you, Kyle Mack. The owner of record of Kyle Mack and Candace Mack. They're the managers. The request would be a variation within the I-1 Light Industrial District to allow 1, accessory outdoor storage to be located in the effective side yard, and 2, a waiver of the minimum 6-foot high screening as outlined in the ordinance. The property consists of 0.99 acres, is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Schroeder Lane and High Point Road. Common street address would be 1620 South Schroeder Lane, McHenry, Illinois, Township of Nunde. The PIN would be 1410-402-001. The current land use is industrial, and the adjacent land use would be industrial to the north, south, east, and west. It is currently zoned I-1 Light Industrial District, and the adjacent zoning would be I-1 Light Industrial for the city of McHenry, and to the west would be the same I-1 Light Industrial for the city of McHenry, and then to the east and the south would be I-1 Light Industrial. The property is currently zoned by the 2030 plan to be office research industrial. McHenry has a designation for the area of industrial. Prairie Grove has no designation. The property is improved with a metal-clad and brick commercial building, an asphalt driveway, and a parking area. There are no wetlands on the property, nor are there any flood hazard areas, and there have not been any floods of record. And there are no zoning violations on the property. The building or structure was constructed in 1981, expanded in 2002. And for the record, would you state your name? I'm sorry, first of all, can you stand and be sworn in? Sure. Do you both promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I did.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Kyle Mack.
And Kyle, what is your business or occupation?
My business is as a landlord. We purchase properties and rent them out. And in this case, we have a tenant who is looking for this accessory storage yard.
And how long have you owned this property?
My wife and I have owned this building since June.
And who is the tenant, the current tenant on it?
The tenant is Brown Equipment Company, and they're a heavy equipment servicer. They rent out equipment to a lot of municipalities.
And how long have they been operating out of this area?
It's been quite recent. The lease was initially signed in October, and I believe they are just now fully operational.
And what types of tenants have you had in the past?
None at this location.
Okay. And what is the nature of the business that's there? I understand that they rent heavy equipment, but that's a national corporation, is it not? Or they have more than one location?
I would call them regional, yep. So they probably have 6 or 7 locations throughout the Midwest.
And roughly how many clients do they have on average?
I did write it down. I just don't want to go off memory. I believe it's about 12 to 15 per day.
Okay.
Folks who are coming in and out.
And why are you seeking this request?
So we're seeking the request for a couple of reasons. They have this heavy equipment. Some of it is quite heavy, weighing up to 80,000 pounds. My concern is that it would begin to damage my parking lot there, where they've kept some of the items in the interim period before we can get a, approved storage yard. But our proposal says that, we would get gravel in the storage yard, and that compacted gravel would prevent damage to the yard. I think it would be aesthetically pleasing, but they can really just pull their trucks in there and just store them for the time being.
Okay, but you would be using some of the asphalt area for moving the vehicles, would you not?
In and out, but they wouldn't just sit there,
Okay.
quote unquote, kind of sinking into my asphalt.
So the sitting is the more damaging aspect?
It's one aspect of it. I think the other thing is the 6-foot fence. There were about 6 you can kind of see them on the map there. There's about 6 landscaping stones. They're quite large. You wouldn't be able to drive a truck over them without damaging your vehicle. And those stones, I think, would really help deter any type of burglary or misuse with the items, because you wouldn't be able to hook your truck up to the equipment and just pull it out of there. A lot of it's on trailers.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What are the tire marks that I'm seeing?
I'm not sure. That's before my time. They're quite deep. It looks like someone drove a tank through there. Those tire marks about a foot deep. So that's just another example of how heavy equipment, granted it's grass and soil, but went through there when it was wet and it just sunk right to the ground.
So the purpose of the stones would be to deter somebody from hooking up a trailer and pulling it off the property, correct? And between the stones, you would have some kind of a gate that would also protect the area?
The plan was to put a gate at the northeast corner.
Are you not worried about vandalism? I mean, stones don't prevent some
Sure.
kid from showing up and doing something.
In consulting with my tenant, they have more experience with their business than I do. They have stated that stones are preferable for them. They have not encountered that type of vandalism. They said if anything, their concern is someone hooking up their F-150 and just driving off with one of their trailers.
What would be the width of the trailer, the typical width?
The trailers, max probably 8 feet, 8 to 10 feet. The gate itself is about 14 feet.
Okay, are any of the trailers under 7 feet?
Probably.
Okay, what is the intended distance between the stones?
It's about 7 feet.
Okay. Would it not make sense to have the stones slightly closer so there was no problem ever of a trailer getting pulled through the area?
Possibly. We could move them a little bit closer. I guess the one thing is you would probably need a truck to pull it through, and you would not be able to get a truck between that distance.
The county talked about a possible request to have you put some vegetation between the stones. Did you talk to them about that?
I did see that in the staff report. I guess the other concern I wanted to point out is, since the tenant is renting out equipment and not selling equipment, we didn't quite fall underneath, I forget the designation, but it was a display type area. We're not quite a display. That's essentially what the tenant is doing here, though, even though we don't fall under that designation under retail, because they're not selling. So the goal was to open it up as much as possible so that if prospective renters come through, they can see, oh, they got the type of equipment. Let's go in there and get the equipment that we need.
If you were to put the stones 6 feet apart, would the county still insist on the vegetation between the stones?
I don't think so. I think that was kind of more of a recommendation, but it does make sense that because these are more for display, as opposed to just a storage yard where there's, vehicles and equipment just being stored for large periods of time, it makes sense to have it more open, but I think that at least would give it a little bit more of a barrier, so I don't think that we'd be opposed to that.
Okay. Would you consider then making the stones 6 feet apart?
Absolutely.
Okay. And have any of your neighbors given you any opinion up or down on the request?
They have.
And can you state what they've done?
I spoke to my 7 immediate neighbors, and no one objected to what I was trying to do. In fact, I did forward about 5 letters. Everyone was supportive.
And pretty much the whole area or neighborhood that you're in is very industrial, is it not?
It is.
How would be the closest residential structure?
At the entrance to High Point, there is a small, I don't know if I call it apartment building. It's for sale, and it is zoned IL. I can point it out on the map there if you'd like.
Okay. And the building to the east, what is that? What type of business?
That's a cold storage building. It is owned by the same person to the south. So, on the east and to the south is owned by the same person.
And if I keep going east to that cold storage building, what would I find?
The next parcel over is storage, and that is also owned by the same guy directly to the east and to the south of me.
Okay.
And then further east is the gas station.
You do have a vacant lot to one side of you, correct?
I'm not sure if I would characterize it a vacant lot because it is the same parcel. as the guy to the south, he owns a larger parcel, and part of it is open, it's a green space, but there is improvement, there's a building and an office on his building.
What type of traffic do you normally have on the roads that are on the two sides of your property?
There's limited traffic. I would say about half of it is from Waste Management, which is the next parcel to the south. The rest of the traffic is mostly tenants in this industrial park.
And when you say large equipment, if you were to put up a 6-foot fence that's a barrier, someone traveling on the road could still see the equipment, could they not? Because of the size of it?
In some cases, yes, but in some cases, probably not.
Okay.
For example, they've got a sewer cleaner. It's probably 15, 14 feet in the air. So you would see that piece, but there was some pictures of equipment that you had, some that you probably would not see with a 6-foot fence. Right there.
Okay.
I don't think you would see all those items with a 6-foot fence.
I do have a handout that I have to provide to you. These have to be covered for the record. These are the standards that you have to meet. So, isn't it true that the particular surroundings, shape, or topographical condition of the specific property involved would result in a particular hardship upon the owner, that being you, as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were carried out? Isn't that true?
That is true.
And isn't it also true that the conditions upon which the application for a variation are unique to the property for which the variation is sought and are not generally applicable to other property within the same zoning district? Isn't that true?
Yes.
Isn't it also true that the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to increase the monetary gain realized on the property? Isn't that true?
Yes.
And you're simply trying to protect your property from the heavy equipment that's going to be stored on the property. Is that correct?
That, and quite frankly, I want my tenant to succeed. I want them to like this location. They were previously located in Lake County, and they moved over to McHenry, and they service all the way up into Waukesha County in Wisconsin. So I want them to be happy where they are and stick around. And getting these variances approved helps that cause.
Good. Isn't, I don't know why I'm losing my voice. Isn't it also true that the alleged difficulty or hardship is caused by the ordinance and has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property? Isn't that true?
That's true.
And this is really done for your tenant's request, not necessarily your request. You're trying to
Correct.
accommodate your tenant.
If my building was vacant, we wouldn't be here today, but the tenant.
Correct. And isn't it true that the granting of the variation will not be detrimental to the public wealth or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located? Isn't that true?
The opposite, it'll add to it.
Okay. And your one neighbor owns most of the property surrounding your property, correct?
2 sides.
Okay. And they're both in favor of this request.
They are. He did submit a letter of support.
Isn't it also true that the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property or substantially increase the congestion of public streets or increase the danger of fire or endanger public safety or substantially diminish or impair property values within the adjacent neighborhood? Isn't that true?
That's true.
And in fact, by using stones which are lower rather than a 6-foot fence, you would allow a better line of sight for any vehicle traffic on the road. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that the granting of the variation requested will not confer on you, the applicant, any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land or structure in the same zoning district? Isn't that true?
Yes.
If some other property owner had a similar request, you'd be in favor of that, wouldn't you?
Would.
Are you aware of the county's rule regarding impervious surfaces?
Yes. I spoke to, I believe, Kim, we were emailing about that.
And the county and I may have a different definition of impervious surface, but you understand if you put down a lot of gravel, they view that to be impervious.
Yes.
And you will be able to do this and not violate the county rule. And for the record, there are currently no zoning violations on the property, isn't that correct? Does staff anything that they wish to add, say, or do? Other than I'm very impressed by your use of the computer.
The only thing I wanted to just expand on what Kyle had said is that for retail
operations that have sales, they are allowed an outdoor display area. There's kind of a technicality in the ordinance that if it's for rent, they don't allow for the display area currently. So it does have a retail component, but it is for rent instead of sale, and that's where the difference is. But otherwise, we wouldn't have any objection to the request.
Okay. All right, at this point, I would be in favor of the request. I would ask that the applicant consider putting the stones 6 feet apart. I would then not require or request that there be screening in between. I don't know that putting a small bush would prevent somebody from driving through it if they were seriously so inclined. But I do believe the standards have been met. I understand the purpose of it. As long as he can stay within the impervious surface area, everything should be fine. I would recommend this to the county board. When's the next meeting?
That will be February 21st.
You do not have to attend if you do not want to. The odds are you'll be on what they call the consent agenda. They will simply put forward a bunch of items and vote for it. And you would not be required to make any kind of statement or testimony at that point.
Thank you.
And you need a 50% or slightly better than 50% of the members who are in attendance of that meeting to approve it. Mine is simply a recommendation. Okay?
And it's the county board.
Correct.
Thank you for your time.
This to the next one.
Thank you.
Can I tell if you were more popular or less popular?
Have a good day.
What's the guy's name?
Yeah, I didn't expect a no-show.
Recalling the meeting on 2022-045, the purple request for a variation to allow a minimum setback of 20 feet instead of the minimum 100 feet required from the north property line for an animal care shelter. And also number 2, a minimum setback of 45 feet instead of the minimum 100 feet required from the south property line for an animal control shelter. This is a continuation. Present would be the petitioner, and I believe also the property owner, is that correct?
No, I'm the grandfather of one of the owners.
Oh, you're the grandfather,
Right.
okay. I knew you had some finger in the pie. And at this point, there are no other people who are appearing either in support or opposed to this. We do have a number of letters that you have received or emails that you have received from people regarding a request, is that correct?
No, that was on the last one.
Ooh, okay. I'm sorry. I took that to be favorable. Did we put those in record?
They're in the file.
Okay. I would ask that they be part of the record. Have you had any other conversation with any neighbors since we've last talked?
No.
Okay. Anything else at this point that you wish to add?
No. Just, I guess, a clarification on do I talk about this list of items? Okay. So we're willing to abide by these directives. I just want to clarify for number 3, which talks about the area east of the building shall not be used as a play area, but may be utilized for training no more than 2 dogs at a time. I'm just confirming that we're only talking the area to the east that is subject to the variance, correct? Because there's a small section that's not subject to the variance. I just want to make sure that that's has nothing to do with this restriction. So if you pull up the site map, the updated site plan.
Oh, you're talking about the area that is north of the dash red line?
That is south of the tread line.
Yeah, so it would
That has
only-
nothing to do with any
Right.
restrictions. It's only the area that's here.
Correct.
Like north in the blue section?
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine.
Other than that question, what is your attitude regarding the proposed conditions that staff has prepared?
We believe we can comply with them and still fulfill our goals and mission of the sanctuary.
Kim, can you explain the reasons for the proposed conditions?
There were concerns by the neighbor and a neighbor that was not present that had submitted something in writing as well. We felt that this was something that would get not only staff's backing of this, because we are in favor of it pending these conditions being in place, but felt that it would accommodate the neighbors as well for any concerns that they had.
Okay. And in the neighbors that did have contact with staff, can you explain what that would have been, what their attitudes were?
I believe they were concerned about noise, about barking. Mr. Kerpel has modified the site plan to eliminate the dog runs on the east side of the building, and before that had eliminated the ones on the north side of the building. So he's continued to be accommodating to try to minimize the noise by putting in the sound attenuation barrier inside the building. I think all of those combined will help to minimize any disturbance to the neighbors.
Yeah, the applicant appears to be very cooperative and willing to work with the county.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And did the county ever consider some kind of recommendation regarding the number of possible dogs on the site?
We did not. The animal care shelter standards that are in the ordinance don't limit a number, so we didn't feel that was appropriate. By limiting where they can be, we felt that that was more appropriate. And also, the south dog runs are now more than 100 feet away from the north property line, which is compliant with the ordinance, so we can't really regulate how many can be in that location anyway.
In reality, we're not really zoning an animal shelter. We're simply doing a lot line variation request.
Correct, to the building.
Okay. Anything else that you wish to add?
I don't think so.
Anything else that anyone wishes to add?
No, just going off your last statement, you were basically differing between a conditional use versus a variance request, correct? That's what that referred to, okay.
Okay. Then I believe that brings to an end the hearing. Based on the proposed conditions and the applicant's indication that they would accept those, I would be in favor of this request. In reality, we are not zoning an animal care shelter. We are simply looking at a variation, and we've tried to accommodate the neighbors as best as possible. And I do believe that the standards have been met, and I believe that this is something that should go to the county board with my approval. I would approve it, and the next meeting would be?
February 21st. Would
And-
you, I'm sorry, would you mind reading the conditions into the
Sure.
record?
I was going to say the approval is based on the proposed conditions that are set forth, and that would be number one, the operation of the animal care shelter shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan. I tried to get mints from the machine, they didn't have any.
Would you like me to read them?
I tried to get water from the machine, they wouldn't take my debit card.
If you'd like me to read them.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, would you read?
Sure.
I'm losing my voice
Yep.
for some reason.
Number one, operation of the animal care shelter shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan dated January 4th, 2023, attached. Number two, outdoor runs shall be prohibited along the north, east, and west sides of the building. Number three, the area east of the building shall not be used as a play area but may be utilized for training no more than 2 dogs at a time. Number four, an architect shall design a sound attenuation barrier along the interior north side of the building to be submitted as part of the commercial building permit application to the Department of Planning and Development. Consultation with an acoustic engineer would be recommended as part of the design process. Number five, any structure or part thereof to be utilized in association with an animal care shelter shall be subject to McHenry County Commercial Code requirements, as well as the McHenry County Public Health Ordinance. Number six, the applicant must provide a report to the McHenry County Department of Health
to describe how the proposed animal care shelter will provide sanitary disposal, solid waste disposal, and noise control. The report shall be approved by the McHenry County Department of Health prior to approval of the use. Number 7, exercise yards when provided for training or exercising are restricted to use from dawn to dusk. And number 8, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met.
Okay, those would be incorporated into my approval then. Good luck. And the county board meeting was?
February 21st.
Okay.
And we indicated for the record, the respondents are not present today, correct?
Yes.
You're not required to be there, but there is a chance that you may or may not be on the consent agenda.
So it will.
Oh, no, I meant today, that they're not here today.
Yeah, you mentioned that there was nobody else here.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then as far as the 21st,
Yeah, so it will be on the consent agenda, but there is a committee of the whole meeting of the county board the Thursday prior to the county board meeting, which is February 16th. If there's any specific discussions that they want to pull it from the consent agenda, if a neighbor were to reach out and, request that or something, it's possible that they could pull it from the consent agenda for further discussion. It's not really going to impact, you still are gonna need a simple majority of the total number of board members, so.
What
Okay.
time is that meeting?
That's at 7 PM.
And
Is it
then-
here?
Yeah, it'll be in the county boardroom upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily need to be there.
that's for February 21st at 7 PM?
Yes, and then the committee of the whole would be at, I believe it's 9 AM. I'll double check that on the 16th.
Is that something we're able to attend?
You can
or is
attend,
that-
yeah, it's a public meeting.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
All right,
Are we off the record then?
let me stop the recording.
Off the record.
Off the record.
Okay, so, I've never done anything like this